Okay, good evening, everyone. We are starting our series on the Omer count, looking at some different aspects of it that are not typically discussed, and also expanding some thoughts around it. So this will be fun. We're starting a little early. We're going to do some background stuff, as always, and then getting into the first of the midot or sephirot, which would be chesed. So we're doing this ahead of the Omer Khan, ahead of Passover, so people can have this information if they want to share it with others. If you're in a maybe an informal setting with friends or family for Passover, you can pull some stuff out of here for discussion, which is great. That's what we should always be doing, is just keep sharing and sharing and sharing. That's how we just grow Torah, right, around the world. So we're doing Chesed a couple weeks early, and we'll skip April 2, because that's Seder night 2, and I know some people are doing the second night Seder. So I'll open the Zoom room just for general conversation, because I'm doing something on the first night, and so that'll just be kind of skipping a week, but the Zoom room will be open, and then we'll restart on, what would that be, April 9th, which is exactly the beginning of the week for Gevurah, the second one. So we're right on time. That's the first night of the second week, on Thursday, the 9th. So it'll be perfect. And then we'll just continue each week, going through all seven till we get to Shavuot. And then we'll stay up all night together. We could do that. I've done that before. It's an interesting experience, to say the least. Okay, so as always, I mentioned I'd like to start with some background stuff for fundamentals. It tends to be that people like to just start with topics that then and discussing and arguing about them, and not knowing how they connect to the big picture. It's always good to learn that big picture, fundamentals, whatever word you want to use, and then get down to the littler parts. That way you understand how everything connects and functions better. Okay, so that's it. Schedule wise, we got that covered, and there'll be a couple websites that get mentioned tonight and some other things. So we'll get to those when we get to those. All right, here we go. It's working. You should be seeing the second slide now, right? So yeah, this first week of the Omer count deals with an attribute called Chesed. So that's one of the things when you deal with these different things. They're called the 10 of them, because there's 10 emanations of God in existence that create the image of God. And that's what we deal with, really. We don't deal with God in essence. That is transcendent, and that's in the future, when we're back totally one with Hashem in the world to come, the Olam Haba. But until then, we're dealing with God within existence. It's not another God, it's just an aspect of God that we deal with. So there's 10 attributes or characteristics. I don't like the word characteristics, but they're called sephirot. They're called emanations. They're called attributes. They're also in different texts called gates or crowns. There's other like little nicknames, I guess you could call them that, but they all refer to the same thing. There's a series of 10 attributes, and the upper three we don't. They're important to learn about, and we'll mention them tonight because they kind of set the framework for everything. And then the lower seven within the 10 are the ones that we deal with on a regular basis in creation. So for the Omer count, you go through all seven. We go through all seven. And we do that at Sukkot too, in the fall. In Sukkot, it's 7 days. So we do one each night. And we just do each one like, is the word insular? Singularly. Okay. But in the Omer count, it's different. You go through the first one, and then you look at all seven aspects, including the one itself within it. So you get a much deeper, comprehensive view of each one, because things are not completely isolated in our world, right? When we talk about someone being a certain way, well, there's all kinds of other things that impact that and that person. So we're looking internally at all seven within each one, which gives us the 49 days of Sukkot. And these sephirot, or these midot, is another word. I don't know if I mentioned midot. The midot is generally a term used for the lower seven, and the idea of repairing them, tikkun midot, or our soul, tikkun nefesh, but tikkun midot, repair of the attributes, is what we're learning to do when we go through these 49 days and look at each one and different aspects of each one. So this is all about repairing things. When you repair something, it's fixed, and now it's excuse me, when it's fixed, connection can be made. So all of these things throughout the whole Bible pretty much is about repairing something so that we have a better connection to God. That's really what the Torah is mostly about. You could put it that way. These Sephirot or Midot, I would say there are three things. They are the actual, like the attribute itself, what it is, like judgment or mercy, right? It is, but it's also represents like the channel for that to come into existence. So it's the attribute and the channel to bring it into existence, and then once it's in existence, it like manifests or functions a certain way. Like so, we actually experience it. So there's like kind of like I would say three parts, and these things are explained different ways. This is just my way of explaining it. So there's three parts to each of these emanations of Sephirot or Midot. What it is with God, the channel to bring it to us, and then how it expresses itself in existence. So it's all of that kind of wrapped into one. And the Sephirot are key to understanding the attributes of God, and by doing that, and I mentioned earlier, like understanding things at a higher level or a fundamental level, it gives us the ability to understand all these spiritual concepts and terms in the Bible. There's a book that we'll mention later. Just thought of this, Share Ora, Gates of Light, written like 800 years ago. And it's all about the explaining in detail these 10 emanations, and there's 10 names of God that go with each one. And there's all kinds of things it shows like in throughout the text of the Tanakh and how they relate to all the 10. So a really good book for like, connecting a lot. It's connecting a whole lot of dots, put it that way. Interesting too is the idea of when God created the world. It's like the way it's presented is interesting. It's like, was he going to create it more with judgment or mercy? And I don't know, you may have heard that kind of discussion. And it's like there's different views whether it was like a mixture or cooperation between the two, or one started and shifted to the others. There's a lot of thoughts around that, how these things came into play. But eventually it seems like it became the inclusion of one within the other, so that the world wouldn't be too no boundaries and then fall apart because of that, or too strict, too judgmental, because that would be very hard for us to get by. So it became kind of like a mixture of the two together, which is really what the Omer count's about. It's showing how these things are integrated and create like a type of balance, if you will, to these things. So the first week of Chesed, we look at these, one within the other. And I got my own little like, what do you want to call it? An art display. What do you call that in the museum? I forget. But I got my own little series of images I created for each day. It's on the website, 13 Petals website. And I pulled from that. That's where these pictures come from. I've had them up there for years. The first one's interesting. I'm not going to go too much detail, but the first one's interesting. I don't know if you can tell what you're looking at on the top right. The first one's on the top right. It says day one. Chesed within Chesed. So it's like the highest expression of loving kindness within loving kindness, Chesed within Chesed. And if you're looking at that image in the blue and the black lines, you might be wondering, what is that? It's actually in an art gallery, and it's actually named Shir HaShirim. And that's going to be real important later too tonight, Shir HaShirim. And I don't know if you want to try to venture a guess as to what that is in the image. This is just like blue and some black lines. You're looking down in the water, and those are the wheels and axles of the chariots of the Egyptians that were killed and drowned in the water. That's what that is. And it's a representation of God's ultimate love for the children of Israel. That's wild, huh? And I can't read the Hebrew. It's too small and fuzzy, but there is some Hebrew text up there. But that's what you're looking at. Those are the wheels and the axles of the chariots. Isn't that wild? So I'm not an artistic, like interpret art type things very well. So, but I found this really fascinating. So I use that. And then the rest are just like, the scales of justice on the left within the cookies. So one is, kind of, oh no, I'm going to be judged for something, but here's a yummy cookie, right? So Gevurah within that. And then Tiferet is a concept of harmony and balance. And I have these two men, a white man, a black man, integrating, talking, closely together. I think that was taken. This picture was taken in Crown Heights, and that's where there's a lot of Jewish and black communities living close by. In fact, there's one street where one side's all Jewish, and right across the street they're all black Americans. And then you go down to the others. Which is what's it, Omer for doing take Omer for is in that sock very proactive, do something for a loved one. I thought that was a cute picture. Five is interesting. This Hod is what like my almost my favorite one to study because reflect what's it refractive, but you're getting something and contemplating it and then coming up with what you need to do. I like that Stephen Covey book, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, and the fifth habit, which all his habits align with these perfectly, by the way. The fifth habit is seek first to understand and then to be understood, which is beautiful. So I have a picture there of a couple that seems to be having a little quarrel, perhaps. I'm sure some of us have been there with that kind of thing, where you have to give serious thought about what's important and then come back with a response. The sixth one is interesting because that's the splitting of the sea, which causes the actual connection for them to come through. So Yesod is all about connection, and then the seventh one is just an artistic picture about what you actually do in the world. The seventh one is always the last one of how things manifest in the world, Malkut, and a lot of people get too hung up on trying to do things perfect and fail and get depressed. And I always say that it's the struggle that means a lot to Hashem. It's us when we're struggling. That's what he loves. That and it's hard. It's hard to think of that, but that's what he really loves is the attempts we make. Even if we fail, as Proverbs say, right? The righteous fall 7 times, and 7 times they get up with Hashem's help. So, anyhow, Chesed is all about proactive and starting and getting things moving forward, and these different aspects within it. I think that's all I had to say about this. So as I said earlier, the aspect of Chesed is directly associated, the aspect of the Omer count is directly associated with Sukkot. And this is an image for Sukkot with the 7, what they call Ushpizin, guests. And what you do at Sukkot, if you're not familiar, is when you have a sukkah in your yard or whatever, one of the things you do, there's a few things, is each day is considered like you're inviting one of these people into your tent. And no, you're not summoning the spirits or nothing like that. It's just symbolic in a way. But you learn about that particular person's attributes. So the first one is Abraham. So the image is off because it goes Abraham and then of course Isaac and Jacob. And for Sukkot, you then go Moses and then Aaron and then Joseph and then King David. In this image, they put Joseph in the middle, which actually there's a tradition about putting Joseph in the middle because he is at Yesod, really like about connectivity. So he's in a sense in this image. I think what this represents, again, we're going back to me trying to interpret art, but I think it represents him connecting like the patriarchs and what they were all about with the then, later Moses, Aaron, and finally David. So that's my guess. But anyhow, Joseph's in the middle here. And as I said, Sukkot and the Omer count in the spring, Sukkot in the fall, are very intimately connected because you're going through the 7, only in more detail this time of year, which is fun. Okay. So we're leading with Abraham. And like I said, I'm going to do some things different tonight and also some pretty unusual things. But Abraham is the first with Chesed, which is in the middle on the right there. I put part of the diagram here because it looks cool. That's actually what PowerPoint does. It's like, here's an idea. So I focus on these, right? But here, what I'm doing on the right is focusing more on the right side and the left side and leaving the middle out for now. And I'll show you why in a minute. And you can do around, what's interesting is you can play around with these things. And it's funny because there's a book called Sefer Yetzirah that actually talks like the language, like the letters of Hebrew and the things they can represent. It actually says something about like playing around with the letters and stuff. It's kind of interesting concept. But you when you do connect different things, different spiritual concepts, and you bring two different ones together, it's like you're bringing a mother and a father and they have a baby. You create a third idea or concept sometimes, and joining them like that's called a chibur, and a chibur is like the bride and the groom, and when they come together, and we'll talk about that in a bit. That unity creates something. So here we're going to look at instead of just the seven, which is what we do for the Omer count, I'm going to focus on the right and the left concerning something with Abraham, as he was known for being the ultimate get up and go chesed. If you read those texts on the left, he was very hospitable. He didn't wait around, as we'll read in a minute. But when God asks him to do something, like when he tells him to go, we listened to a song earlier, Lech Lecha, when he says, go to yourself, Abraham didn't start saying, well, what do you mean? What do I need to take? Where am I going? He just went. He just started going with where God was directing him. So that's Abraham is all about the right side, Hesed, and the whole right side. And the thing is, there's a teaching that Abraham was on the right side, but deficient on the left. Like there was a whole discussion, the Midrash, where God says, take your son. And Abraham's like, well, which son? And God says, well, the son you love. And he's like, well, I love them both. And they're going back and forth in the Midrash. And finally he figures it out. It's like God says, come on, you know what I'm talking about. So he had a little bit of a issue there. And of course, the story in the Bible that Sarah is brought into the picture. And Abraham's told, just listen to her. She'll take care of it. And she does. And out goes Hagar and Ishmael. So, but he's very much on the right side. And we're going to dive into a text here to look at what an issue, not an issue, but something interesting. So remember, we're looking at the right and the left. And the text is Genesis 18, verses 1 to 8 on the left. You're very familiar with this, I'm sure. You can read it if you want on the left side. It's the story of, why don't we read it? The Lord appeared to him by the oaks of Mamre. He lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, 3 men were standing before him, and he saw them and ran from the tent entrance to meet them and bowed to the ground. He said, my Lord, if I found favor in your sight, do not pass by your servant. Let a little water be brought, and wash your feet, and rest yourselves under the tree, and I will bring a morsel of bread. So Abraham hurried into the tent of Sarah and said, quick, 3 measures of fine flour kneaded and make cakes. Abraham ran to the herd and took a calf, tender and good, and gave it to a servant who hurried to prepare it. And then he took curds and milk and the calf and that had been prepared and set it before them and stood by them under the tree while they ate. Now, if you remember, we were looking at the right side and the left side without the middle, and it's real interesting because that's exactly what happens in this passage. It starts with Chokhmah, which is that spark of, like when you get an idea, insight. He sees these men. He doesn't have to think about it. Boom. He gets right up, right? There's 3 people coming. I got to react, right? In a positive way, Mr. Hospitality. And then he quickly assesses the situation, as we see in the text, because this just follows the text exactly. It's really neat. And he says, okay, I know what I need to get. I got to get the water, get the food. And he forms a plan in his mind. So this is the upper dimension before we start taking action of Chokhmah and Binah, where you get the inspiration for an idea. And sometimes when that happens, you get busy or distracted and you forget, that little spark goes. But other times you do pause to think about your idea and the details. And that's what Chokhmah and Binah do in your mind whenever you do have an idea. So that's what happens here. Then he gets moving. In a sense, he starts putting the plan into motion. Okay, he offers them bread and the finest flour, tender calf, curds and milk. This is like the best stuff. So he's starting to get the plan into action, but he's not actually doing it yet. This is that middle level. Then over on the left side, the text then follows. And again, this is following the text. He organizes and directs, tells Sarah what to do, assigns the servant. So everything is like the plan is being put into effect. It's not just a chesed without Geburah. So he's actually implementing at Geburah on this side as well, but it's very reactive in a sense because it doesn't have that. There's no sense of the middle column here of taking the time for balance and all that. But that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just interesting. Then finally, at the end comes the plan Netzach. Now, Netzach and Hod are the legs. That when you compare these emanations to the human body, they're the legs because they always seem to appear together in text because the legs are always working together, right? Sometimes you use your right arm or left arm for one reason or the other. You don't eat with two hands, right? Well, unless you're cutting something, I suppose. But generally, when you get up, walk, or whatever, you use both legs at the same time. So you'll see those two together a lot. So that's he's hurrying, running around doing everything. And then Hod at the end, you see humility. He stands there and he just stands by while they eat to see if they need anything. So that's real interesting that you see the right side attributes and the left side attributes going back and forth here for Abraham regarding these guests. So it's just the point here, or a point here, is that you'll see these different emanations, these sephirot in action throughout the Bible in different ways, different places. Sometimes it's just certain ones, and sometimes there's a pattern like this going back and forth. And the thing with Abraham I was going to mention is because he was a little too much on the right side of Chesed and Chokhmah, wisdom, just like King Solomon had the same problem, right? King Solomon was all about wisdom, but the left side of restriction and judgment and that kind of stuff. He had too many wives and too many horses and all this stuff, so he was deficient on that side. And he needed someone to help build the temple, as you recall, right? So Abraham needed Sarah to help balance him out. And then his son Isaac's the exact opposite. Isaac's very strict. We'll get to him next week when we do the next recording. And he had Rebecca to balance him out. And it wasn't until you get to Jacob, who's in the middle at Tiferet on the Tree of Life diagram. Jacob had the balance. It says what was it? He lived in two tents, Abraham and Isaac's tents. So he learned from both, and he became that balance between the two, and also had two wives, one of which Rachel represents Malkut, and Leah represents Binah, above, the two feminine aspects. So he had the left-right balance and the above and below balance, and at Tiferet, which is like where you would put Mashiach if you were Messiah, if you were going to map that out. So he's a very messianic figure. I would say so are others like Moses and David, but there's more stuff that I've found written about Jacob. I'm on a bunny trail here now. More stuff written about Jacob being a very messianic character in various texts, which is interesting. I'm going to pause in a second here so we can just see if there's anything that came up. Oh yeah, we saw this, some of you in a diagram before. So I'm going to leave from Abraham for a moment here. And we'll look at this. I added something to this. I know I brought it up in a previous presentation. So we have windows that are blocking here in the way. I'm going to close these so they're not in my way. Oops, don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. Hold on a second. I messed up my screen. So we did this, I think in a presentation earlier for Passover, that these aspects of these emanations, these midot, appear not only in the Bible, but things that come from the Bible, such as Passover and the modern Passover Seder that people do. And one of the ways they show up or are understood is through the elements around the Seder plate. So you have the plate with the 6 different types of food, if you will, on them. And the 6 represent these 6 emanations that are always together. And they're like the masculine aspect, the lower masculine aspect is 6 of those that are on the screen there at the bottom, through Chesed, through Yesod. And they represent the masculine or the son or the bridegroom, the groom. That's the most major theme. And then the plate itself, or your dinner table, or your home, any of the 3 or all 3 represent Malkut. Malkut's always the down-to-earth, aspect of this stuff. Okay, but you also have what? 3 pieces of matzah, which is interesting because the matzah is not on the plate with everything else. The matzah is separate. They represent the 3 upper dimensions of Chokhmah, Binah, and Keter, right? They're related, but they're separate, so that you see the concept there, which is cool. And then it goes even further because you have one of the pieces that's hidden away, right? The afikomen. So yeah, what's hidden away is Keter, right? We don't relate directly to Keter. We don't. We can study it, but it represents that which is beyond existence. It represents like Ein Sof. So that's like the hidden Afikomen. But wait a minute, that would leave you with only 9 aspects around the dinner table. But there's always 10. And when Keter is out of the picture, Da'at enters. So Da'at is the how do they put it? The representation of Keter, like within, when you're discussing things within existence. Da'at kind of fills it. I can't remember the word I'm looking for. But anyhow, if you remember, if you know, the Afikomen, there's a piece broken off, a little piece, right? That's brought back to the table with everything else. So when Keter's out of the picture, the Afikomen, that little piece comes back to the dinner table to represent the eye. So it's pretty cool how this is found like within the whole plate and the food and everything around Passover. Sometimes there's some other traditions align the 6 dishes a little differently. I like this one. I just thought this is the one that kind of is the most accurate, if you will. Okay. I think let's see what's next, and then we'll take a break. So we saw this too in a previous one, but I put it in uh, this week's Zoom room so people could see this. This is another example here. I won't spend too much time on it. But the idea here is this verse in the Talmud, Pesachim 54a. And the idea here is that God always provides what will be needed before it's needed. Or in other words, he'll have the cure ready before the problem even shows up. So there's these 7 things, and that's the understanding behind these 7 things and why they were created before creation, why they came about. So they would be needed for different reasons. And the reasons pretty much always has something to do with what I said earlier of repair and connection. So it has something to do with that. And the last one, the name of Messiah, I just want to clarify that. It's not like a personal name. The name of Messiah is the concept of name here, as it is through the Tanakh, has to do with like an attribute or function. Or in the case of even the Messiah would be like the merit, Zekos, the merit of the Messiah. So it has to do with those kind of things. When you hear, when someone comes in the name of the Lord, there's a lot of crazy groups out there today that are saying, oh, this is the name, you have to use this name. It's like, no, it doesn't even mean that. It means like the authority. I'm here in the authority of the Lord. That's what the Torah is teaching. So it's not a name like Bill or Joe or anything like that. So in this case, we don't see Keter because it's always out of the picture, but we also don't see the emanation we're studying right now, Chesed, because Chesed represents the right hand of God, and everything is delivered from the right hand of God. So that's like the delivery mechanism for these things. So that's why it's taught that this is not included in here. This stuff comes from the Arizal, the Ari, who was he's like the father of modern Kabbalistic teaching from several hundred years ago. So that's where this teaching originates from. And I mentioned earlier that Netzach and Hod always show up together because like feet running. So this is like running through time, like the Mashiach, like through time. He's in every generation it's taught. So that's pretty cool. So that's what this teaching from Pesachim 54a also aligns with the same thing. It's aligning with these aspects of God that keep showing up everywhere. And I think I have a break slide coming up, so in a couple, I think. So I'm just going to keep going here, and then we'll pause, take a break for get a drink, ask questions, or whatever. So I was working on my Song of Songs study, Shir Shirim study, and oops, I put that out of the window now. Here it is. I don't want to miss anybody coming in, but I know you're keeping an eye out for people too. But I did not do what I was going to do. Pardon me a second. Aaron's here. I was going to promote Aaron to get this to work here. Oh, there it is. Okay. 1 second. I am making Aaron a co-host, so you can keep an eye out for people and let them into, because I have to get these things out of my screen because they're blocking things that I need to see. So you and Anita now have been promoted. Okay. So, oops. Where are we? I messed things up here. Hold on a second. Let's stop the share for a second so I can fix this. Clicked on the wrong window. Are you guys if you can tell me out loud, are you seeing the Midot and Shar Sharim screen?
Not right now.
Not right now. Okay, so I need,
I was, but not now.
all right, so I need to go back and find, yeah, when I minimize these windows, I lost, oh, there we go, share. I lost
Hmm.
my control of everything here. Okay, so this should be coming back here in a second. Three, two, one, boom. Got
I
it?
see, see it now.
Cool. So I was working on Shar Sharim, and as I was doing that, I was kind of like, I wasn't even thinking about this. And I was just noticing that, well, Shir Shirim is a story. It's a flow of correction. That's what it's about. The feminine aspect in the storyline of Song of Songs represents us trying to connect back to God. Also represents the Shekhinah that's with us, that divine presence aspect, which is feminine with us, the bride. It's all we're all one, and trying to return back, to the king. So that's all in there. So I was noticing some of these things, and then I asked my best friend Chat GPT. Seriously, Chat GPT is great for this stuff. I asked it for a little help because I was missing a couple and it found them. And I noticed they also happen to flow in order, like the verses. So these 7 verses from Song of Songs, again, align wonderfully with the 7 lower emanations, starting with a very proactive. This is like the second verse. The first verse is like, this is a Solomon's story or something like that, right? So the first real verse is her taking a proactive, like in a masculine way, I'm saying, for in terms of the energy, making it, she's saying, let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. It's like not a shy, humble request. It's very bold. And the feminine character is very bold in places in Shara Shireen. And then in other places, she's a little too bold. And the masculine character has the kind of reminder of things that need to be fixed. In essence, really, the story is about a strong desire to have a connection, but before you make the connection, you've got to fix things. I always use the analogy of a house with the sink and the bathtub and the washer, and you need water coming in, and you have the big water pipe from the city coming in. But if you hook that up and turn on all your stuff, but you forgot to connect the internal plumbing to the house, you're gonna have a flood. So you got to fix everything in between, because turning that on ahead of time, and 3 times in Song of Songs, 3 times it says, do not awaken love before it's time. That's the second one on the left side, restriction. Right? So that's pretty cool. But that's the concept there, that we have things to fix, which I'm just going to say is a big differentiation between Torah, Judaism, and Christianity. Because Christianity is like, you just believe something and everything's fixed. Now you're on your way. And Judaism says, no, we're here to work on ourselves. And as I mentioned earlier, the struggle and the process is really pleasing to Hashem when we're working on it, no matter what we're doing, especially when we do it with other people, because that's the additional blessing we've talked about, where 2 or more are gathered. The Shekhinah, the divine presence, is like activated. It's between them. So getting together is like critically important. It's good to study on your own, but I know there's a lot of people like on Facebook and all, I know them, and they don't really do much stuff with people, but they post all the time, and that's great and all, but you really got to interact with other people, because I've got something to offer, you've got something to offer. We all do. And as I said earlier, when you put 2 different ideas together and come up with something new, that's what's called creating new Torah, which sounds weird to people. It's like, well, you're creating your own Torah. No, not my own Torah. It's already there. We're just discovering something new by talking about things in life, and when we talk about them, we like realize something together. And it's like, oh, wow, and it's like, yeah, that was already there. We just found it by interacting, because the divine presence like helped us. The Shekhinah helps us to come up with these things. So anyhow, this is an interesting thing here, where these emanations flow with the story from just the desire, which is the key part, the arousal from below or awakening from below, to tell God or show God, hey, I really want you. I really want to connect with you. And that's what Hashem wants, is that desire from us. And at the end, you see like a concluding one at the very end about, excuse me, sorry, about like, set me as a seal upon your heart. And that is interesting too, because if you think of the Torah being on the heart, right, in Jeremiah, the new covenant, which is the Olam Haba, the world to come, everything will be united again. So that Shir Hashirim is saying, yes, at one time it was all united. Now it's not. And then like what Zechariah says, right, on that day his name will be one. And then comes the Olam Haba, which is like the final thing. 2 interesting texts I pulled up from books I have that relate to this. process of going from here to the end. It's not always easy, and those difficult things that we face along the way are part of the plan. They serve a purpose. So Rabbi Winston, who's one of my favorite teachers for over 30 years now, writes that although many of the steps along the path to redemption are hidden and disguised as negative events, to us, all paths must, by definition, eventually lead to redemption. So, like at Purim, right? There's no difference between blessed be Mordecai and cursed be Haman, right? Because it's all from God. So even the difficulties and things that we face, it's with that Ushpizzi movie we watched, he goes out on the porch to have a cigarette, and the other guy asks him, "How are things going?" And he goes, "Terrible, Baruch Hashem," which is funny, but it's like, yeah, terrible, but hey, it's from God. So that's interesting. And my favorite movie, of course, the Matrix movie. There's a scene where one of the characters, Neo, asks the Morpheus, who's like the Zadik in the movie, things weren't going right. Like they had a meeting with somebody, it didn't go well, and Morpheus says, "No." What did he say? He said, everything went the way it should and could not have happened any other way. It's a great line in the movie which relates to this. Then on the right is interesting. This takes explaining a little bit. The Torah identifies with Song of Songs, Shir Shirim. For the Torah is the pledge for the love around which the song revolves. It's an eternal love, right, from God. It said, this is it. You can't change the world. And, sorry, what? Okay, I heard you speak. So if the pledge is like violated, the Torah itself stands before God's throne as the accuser. It's like, no, 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 you can't violate this. It's an interesting concept. We should do a Shir Shirim one night. But the Torah itself stands there as the proof. So like in the story of Shir Shirim, of Song of Songs, there's a reminder through it that it will turn out right at the end, because that's the plan. You can't avoid it. And the characters discuss this in Song of Songs, that there's problems and things that need to be fixed, and things along the way that will have to be dealt with. But the Torah itself says that this is the end of the story, is this. It's like you've already seen the movie, you already know how it's going to end. So don't worry about things along the way. Like I said, we're doing a couple of different types of things here. So I'm going to stop here and take a mini break, because this is a kind of a long text, but it's really interesting. And I'm going to just pause here for a second. And what I'll do is I'll pause I can pause the video here. Hold on, I'm going to pause the video. Here we go. Okay, so now I'm bringing up this text in the Zohar, because a couple times already the book of Song of Songs has come up. And this is one of the most amazing things, because the Zohar is just like it's like the key text in Kabbalah, right? It's the one everyone knows about. It's a very central. There's other great texts, but it's just well known and quite amazing. It's huge. And the big part of the Zohar, not all of it, but a big chunk of it, is commentary on the 5 books of the Torah, right? From Genesis to Deuteronomy. And within that, Genesis is a little over 50% of that. And then of the whole pie, Exodus is about a third. So between those 2 books, it's like 85% of it. And then there's just a little bit on Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. So it's mainly the first 2 books. So you open up the Zohar, and it's Genesis. So you're going to be studying Genesis. And it's the first verse of the first part, 1:1. And you're all excited to study Genesis. Rabbi Hezekiah opened his discourse on Genesis, right, with the text. And he goes right into Shir HaShirim, Song of Songs. It's amazing. And I left the term Shoshana in there. 2 reasons. One, it's my daughter's name. So this is where her name comes from. And 2, it can be interpreted rose or lily, either one. And some texts put lily in here, but it doesn't make sense, because this is about a rose. It's thorns and red and stuff. So it's really like the rose of Sharon or something. It's the rose. So it could be either, but I left Shoshana in here because it's a pretty name. And like I said, it's my daughter's name. So as a Shoshana, a rose amongst the thorns. So that's an imagery right there of something beautiful and sweet amongst, thorns. What, he says, does the Shoshana symbolize? I love this text. It's a little hard the first time you get through it, or even the 10th time you get through it, but it's pretty wild. What does it symbolize? It symbolizes the community of Israel. So if you stop and think, the Shoshana being like the bride, or the woman is at Malkut, community of Israel is at Malkut. Okay, we're good, right? As the Shoshana among the thorns in this world, right, is tinged with red and white. When you see red and white, that's judgment and mercy. Those are clearly the colors associated with judgment and mercy. The community of Israel now is visited now with justice or judgment and now with mercy. So both, right? So the Shoshana possesses 13 leaves. The number 13 in Torah has to do with the 13 attributes of mercy, which comes up here. So the community of Israel is a word, vouchsafed 13 categories of mercy, which is an actual text in the Bible called the 13 attributes of mercy or something like that. I forget what it's called, which surrounded on every side. So Hashem's always surrounding the community of Israel. For this reason, the term Elohim, God, mentioned here, and I looked this up, this is interesting. In the Zohar gets into weird stuff. In the first verse of Genesis, is separated by 13 words from the next mention of Elohim, which is judgmental. So that's interesting. Symbolizing the 13 categories of mercy that surround the community of Israel to protect it. That's interesting. It's like bookends, you know. The second mention of Elohim in the Genesis is separated from the third mention by 5 words, representing 5 strong leaves that surround the Shoshana, symbolic of 5 ways of salvation that are the 5 gates. So this is getting some interesting stuff here. Hold on a second. Okay, I wanted to check something out. This is alluded to in the verse, I will lift up the cup of salvation. This is the cup of benediction, which has to be raised by 5 fingers. So you have this concept of 5, like 5 books of the Torah. 5 is always, in Gematria, not always, but often, reflective of like 5 books. The Torah, you have the books of Torah is one thing, but there's 5 books. Your hand is one thing, but there's 5 fingers, and so on. That's the concept behind 5. So it's raised by 5 fingers. There's 5, what do you say, 5 gates, 5 ways of salvation. I don't have my notes on these things. This actually relates to some stuff. I thought I did. Hold on. Let's see. It has to be raised by 5 fingers. So it's telling you, like, when you do this or other things you do with the Seder or anything, there's like always some symbolism that relates to an important concept. Everything done in any of the Yom Kippur or Rosh Hashanah, all these things have some type of spiritual meaning and connection. And connection being that as you do them, you are actually making a real connection there if you do it with true intent. So the Shoshana is a symbol of the cup of benediction. So if you start putting all these things together, like the community of Israel is the Shoshana, which is this symbol of the cup of benediction. Immediately after the third mention of Elohim appears the light, which so soon as created was treasured up, hidden up. So that's that light from above that God had to hide because it could be abused by people within creation, and it's kind of saved for the end. I don't know if you've heard of that concept, but you can tap into it now and then. Like in the movie Ushpizin talks about the Or HaGanuz, that hidden light, right? And that you can tap into it if you're doing something righteously, but overall it's hidden away till for the righteous at the end because it's too it's powerful. So you don't want bad elements of the other side, not just necessarily people, but there's the whole concept of the other side, having access to that. It's pretty interesting. Treasured up and enclosed in that covenant, which entered the Shoshana and fructified it. And this is what is called tree-bearing fruit. That's in the Torah. So there's all these mystical connections. We're in the seed thereof, and this seed is preserved in the very sign of the covenant. And here you go. I know somebody, I think Anita maybe mentioned, somebody last week brought this up 2 weeks ago. As the ideal covenant was formed through 42 copulations. A copulation can be a sexual connection or it can be just any type of connection. And so the engraven, ineffable name is formed of 42 letters of the work of creation. So this whole idea of here it is, the fructified it, right? I'd have to look up the word fructified to see exactly what it means, but you get that sense of connection here, and you get the connection of like the bride and the bridegroom, right? That's always the main theme here. And as mentioned before, the bride like circles the groom 7 times, and the groom, the bride's always 7. Malkut is the 7th of the lower 7, and then the 6 parts to the masculine we talked about, right? Those 6 different Sephiroth that make up the masculine, the groom. So the groom's the number six. So 6 times 7 is 42. That's the chibur of the two. So you have the concept of the masculine aspect of God, right, which is a teaching. You have the other aspect of the bride and Shoshana, which is another teaching. And then when you put them together, you create a third thing. You create a new thing. This whole idea of the 42 letter name of God. So when everything's connected, there's all these aspects of like the 12, the four-letter name of God we know. There's the 12, the 22, the 54, the 72, the 42, and they all mean some kind of concept. So when you see 42, it's like the aspect of the bride and groom coming together. And there's examples of this in the Torah, like Ezekiel's temple, when that is brought down, the eastern gate that Mashiach comes through, so he's like coming through to connect to the bride, is 7 by 6 dimension. In Ezekiel, it's 42, what would you call it, square feet. Um, that's interesting. Also interesting is everything has the flip side or the dark side to everything. That's a concept, right? And Balaam offered 6 sacrifices on 7 different mountains, 42. He was trying to like tap into that somehow to curse Israel, and he couldn't. So that's interesting because I got the idea of I had a discussion with Rabbi Abraham Greenbaum from Azamra, real nice guy. We talked about this, and he said, yeah, it's like it's a spiritual window, but there's always the other side too. So that's where I learned about this. That was really cool. So you have that, and of course, Book of Matthew has 42 generations. So anything that's bringing you from like point eight, and it's 42 journeys, of course, in the desert. They have 42 stops along the way, which is a big teaching that we're going to talk about in a few minutes. So that number 42 is all about a connection being made, and at the end of it, there's like a window open. So Balaam was trying to open a bad window and couldn't, but the other examples are more positive. So I love this text because it is so much. You could spend so many hours just trying to figure this out, because there's so many little concepts through it that the Zohar. This is the language of the Zohar. It pulls all these concepts together in like almost like a midrash, like a story, and gives you a whole lot to work on. Everybody wants the easy text to read something, but it's always superficial when you do that. The good stuff is the stuff you have to work on, right? Okay. Excuse me. Let's go on to so I brought this up because the Zohar is cool and some of these concepts come up again. Let's see here. Can we get this? There we go. Okay, now everybody's favorite here. So we mentioned 42 as being, the number of connectivity, which is interesting. So we're going to get into the Anabakol prayer in detail one of the other weeks. I'll pick one of those weeks to get into the whole thing more. For tonight, it would be the first line because it starts with Chesed and goes down to Malkut. And so it's all about, if you follow the flow of it, which it has, it's about the same idea we're doing with the Omer count, right? You're going from Chesed down to Malkut with purpose. And the first line is about, it's proactive. We implore you. It's like kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, right? It's like the same. We implore you. We're taking a proactive stance with God. We're like telling God what to do in the first line. By the great power of your right hand. Hey, what's that? Right? The right hand, Chesed, we talked about. That's tonight. Abraham has said the whole bit. To do something, to release something, to release the captive. So we're captive in this exile, this world we live in where we're disconnected from God and all this crazy stuff happens. And so we're asking God really to end the exile, please. If that's one interpretation, okay? And then over on the left, for us, just for fun, I put this picture. This is an amulet, and you got to be careful with things like amulets because people can treat them like superstition, like all these people wearing red strings years ago, all these like Hollywood people. It was ridiculous, And the red string's not even Kabbalah. It's what's called a Baba Meister. It's it's an old wives' tale. You heard that expression, the old superstitious thing. That's all it is. And it says not Kabbalah. But anyhow, this isn't it. But amulets can be just worn like a reminder to people. Like I had a license plate a year ago, and I won't tell the story tonight of the crazy lady, but there was a woman who saw my license plate once, and it was funny. I had my license plate. I had a vanity plate. I put Zadik on it, not because I'm a Zadik, but it would be my reminder that is like my what's the word? Representation of like what I'm trying to do, trying to be, like a goal. So I'd have that. I had that on my license plate. I still have the plate in my garage. I just don't have it on the car anymore. So that's what amulets can be, like a reminder of things. Like I gave my daughter, well, my daughter has a mug of David, of course, and I gave her a necklace that had a rose in the middle because her name's Shoshana. And I gave her a ring that has the Anabacoa prayer on the inside. So she has all this stuff. Um, and then the thing on the left is funny because at the very top, it's a Bet He Nun Vav, which is Behanu. It's actually on the top, which means um, with the help of God, we will achieve. That's what Behanu means. And then around the perimeter, starting with the Aleph in the top right, going to the left, it's the first letter of every word in the Anabacoa prayer. So each of the letter, and that's the 42 letter name of God, the Aleph, and then you have the Bet, and then the Gimel, right? So if you know the Hebrew prayer, that's the first letter of every word that goes around the outside. The inside is a bunch of angelic names. So it represents like that middle realm. And there's a lot of things that have like angelic, well, even like the song, right? What is it, like Hagudi? There, right? There's a reference in there to the angels and stuff, right? So you gotta be careful with that too. And if you do it the right way, it's great. But you gotta, anytime you start doing things like that, you should know what you're doing carefully before you engage with it. That's all. Then you have the movie or the book. Sorry, the book, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Now, I found this actual image and I thought it was funny. Hitchhiker's Guide to God. And in that storyline, there's these two little characters. They're actually like mice, really intelligent mice. And they had asked what the meaning to life in the universe was to a computer, and the answer he got back was 42. That's was the answer in the story. And uh, and then they started contemplating what the real question would be, and they came up with how many roads must a man walk down, which is in a Bob Dylan song, by the way. But that's fascinating because the rabbis teach that we walk down 42 paths in our life, and it's based on the 42 paths from Egypt to Sinai. This is like mind blowing to think that nobody knew. This guy, the author, went to his grave never revealing what the secret was of 42 in his book. No one really knows. Some people might claim to, but when you look at this, especially that quote, it's like, oh my goodness, there's got to be a connection there. It's just too weird. Right. So Yana Bakoic is considered the most mystical prayer in Judaism. I mean, you have the most well-known one is the Shema, of course, and then you have the only one that addresses the concept of God outside of existence is the Modeh Ani, which is the first prayer of the day. You're actually like speaking in a sense to God that you don't even understand how to speak to. That's the Modeh Ani. Like it's like saying, I know that I existed and still exist in the mind of God, if you will, like something I can't even imagine what that is, but I know that's like the Olam of the world to come, that I'll be back there again. And that's the story of Shir HaShirim as well. We're all going to be back there again, but there's work to do for now. So I love saying that Modeh Ani in the morning because, especially if I'm in the middle of stuff, health crisis, problems with the family, I know it's going to be a day. So I start with that. I put myself at what I call level 5, which is like outside of existence. I'm like, I know there's a plan. I know there's all this stuff from eternity. I know I have nothing to worry about. Help me focus on that. I say the Modeh Ani prayer and then the Shema. So anyhow, this is another example here of the 7 in the prayer, and it follows they do follow the path of the 7 midot that we cover during excuse me, during the Omer count. Okay, what's next here? Oh, take a break. Well, we took a break already. See, I had a break slide. Okay. We could pause for minutes. Anyone has comment or question that you want, it's recorded, but if you want to bring up anything. Otherwise, we'll keep going. I guess we'll keep going. Cool. Okay. I forgot I had a break slide in there. All right. So we're going to get into some crazy stuff now. And then later, even crazier. So there's a creepy guy on the right side. That would be me. And I took that picture today. Yeah, I added the slide. I added the slide today. Yeah. So, because I was looking into this book. Yeah, as you can see, it's tattered. I have 2 books that are completely tattered. Sharei Ora is one, and Derek Hashem is the other from the Ramchal. Direct Hashem is a lot like newer. The Ramchal was a couple hundred years ago. This text goes back to the 13th century. It's like the 1200s, Gates of Light. Right around when the Zohar was out. And another text called the Bahir, which you see referenced on the top left. They all show up around that 13th century, which was kind of like the beginning of the Kabbalistic era. So you have the Torah with Moses, and then you have the prophets and writings, and then you get into the Talmudic era right before before Yeshua, before the Common Era. And then from there, you get into the Midrashic era, which is like the fourth century to, for about like 1,000 years, if you will. This is not precise. And then you get into the Kabbalistic era around the 12th century and up to more modern times, which the final fifth one would be like the Hasidic era, which is more recently. And so you have five different epochs there, right? You have the Torah, the Talmud, the Midrash, the Kabbalah, and the Hasidus, which follows the same pattern of the four. And Hasidus is considered like, the overarching, understanding of everything. But anyhow, this book's interesting for two reasons. One is when we go, as I mentioned, the license plate I had and all this stuff, that the path of study, and the path specifically of studying the Sephiroth and specifically the Omer count, when we're really studying these things, it's like guiding us to be more like God, or if you will, a level we can understand better is like guiding us to be like a truly righteous person, which is the definition of a tzaddik. Okay, so we're trying to that's our goal, or our image. What would you call that in the world as a forget the terminology. But when a person like it truly represents like being a very holy godlike person that we can emulate. Okay, so this is the here also the teachings are tradition associated with like second century, but the book itself showed up around that 13th century. But it quotes people like the Zohar quotes Shimon Bar Yochai from the first century, second century, around there. And some of it might be, but the texts themselves showed up like 1,000 years later. Interesting to think about that. Right? 1,000 years later, a text shows up. And so this is a quote from the Bahir, one who wishes to ascend. Oh, Beth is coming back in. All right. Right on time to let her get in here. Hi, Beth. We were just about to look at something. Welcome back. So this is a text from the Bahir, not the book on the right. One who wishes to ascend on high must always travel along the path from Malkut, kingship, to Yesod, foundation. Looking at the diagram of paths, it is evident that while there are many paths interconnecting the other Sephiroth, there's only one path leading from Malkut, kingship, the lowest Sephiroth, upward. This is the path leading to Yesod, foundation. This path is called Zadik, the pillar of righteousness. So that's from the Bahir. Now, if you look at this other book on the right, you'll see it's shown visually that bottom is Malkut. That's us down here. And all of spirituality represented by those other things depends on this path between Malkut and Yesod. This is where that man representing the Zadik is holding that path, right? You can see holding the little path between the lowest one and the one above. That's the path of the Zadik. That's what it's called. And the Yesod, which is the one above his hand, there's all of these Sephiroth have other ideas and words and concepts associated with each one. Yesod is associated with the Zadik. That's where the Zadik is. So if the Zadik is there and helpful, he is a connection between us below and everything above. Now, in this book, Gates of Light, this is where it gets really interesting. In the book Gates of Light, it has like many words and concepts from the Tanakh associated with each one of these 10. So you can connect a million dots with this book. It's fascinating. And one of the words, well, first of all, Malkut means kingdom. So let's leave that one alone. That's kingdom, right? It's also the Shekhinah and everything down here, right? But Yesod, one of the words associated in the book with Yesod is the word, English word all, like everything, A-L-L, all, okay? Meaning all above, okay? So, and the Hebrew term is kol, K, like a K-O-L, kof lamed. So that's one of like the nicknames or whatever you want to call it for Yesod. So this is interesting because we're to seek the Shekhinah, we're to seek the connection of God in this world first, right? The kingdom. And in the Gospels, it says, seek first the kingdom. And then what does it say next? All will be added to you. That's as Kabbalistic as you can get. That's exactly how it's expressed in like these type of books. Seek first the kingdom, and all Yesod and everything above will be connected to you. So that's the path of the righteous. You seek, and it's associated, the Malkut's associated with humility, right? So it's a humble person is not arrogant toward God, that seeks God in humility. And then all, that's the path of the Zadik is one of humility. So it's fascinating to see how this connects to like something like the Gospels. So I'm not going to go through all these, but I just wanted to show you that this concept of the Zdik is not just like in one area of Jewish literature, Torah literature, because the first um, four of these quotes are from the Talmud, and then you get two from Midrash, and then the bottom three from the Zohar, and they all talk about the Zdik through all of these texts. So the concept of a righteous person as a true Zdik is a prominent one in Torah Judaism. Now, that's critical to learn this stuff if you want to try to understand the concept of the Messiah, of Mashiach, because Mashiach is the ultimate Tzaddik. He's the top of the pile. Okay? So this is what's missing in Christianity, for example, all of this stuff that is foundational to the idea that there can be a Tzaddik that can do some like incredible, amazing things representing God in the world. So you look at some of these quotes, and like Sanhedrin's no, which one? Bereshit Rabbah, there in the middle. So meritorious are the Tzaddikim, that's plural, that they're able to placate God and nullify decrees. They're able to stay like Moses, right? He told God, "Hey, come on." God said, "I'm killing them all, right? I'm done with these people." And Moses, the Tzaddik, jumps in and nullifies, changes God's mind, right? So the idea that someone is so in line with and this is all, of course, in line with the will of God, not going against it, but that can be that close to God, like a friend. Okay, Abraham, right? We're studying Abraham a little bit tonight. Abraham's called a friend of God, right? That someone can be so close to God like that, they can say, "Hey, come on, give him a break." And it's kind of interesting concept, but it's all through the literature, right? So this is pretty fascinating. But I got some other quotes that are really cool. So there is a book called The Zadik by Samuel Gessner. It's all about this topic. Very cool book. And there's a quote at the top is pretty neat. A flaming chesed, right? We're studying chesed tonight. Is the Zadik's light. There's another quote I didn't put it here. It's called the judgment, the gevurah, the judgment of the Zadik is chesed. So everything goes back to the concept of chesed. So chesed and yesod are very closely connected like that. And it's interesting. I know I bring this up. It's probably annoying to people. My favorite movies, again, The Matrix, is all about this stuff. And there's a character, Morpheus, that acts as the Zadik, right, at Yesod, and everyone escaping like the non-reality of the Matrix. Like he gets them out, like he leads them into the truth. And he's all Chesed through the movie. So he's Chesed and Yesod. So it's really cool how they represent that in the movie. So you have this first idea here that just like the concept of wisdom, which is, remember, on the right side, wisdom is above chesed. And wisdom is the first thing we actually deal with. We don't deal with keter, which is like called nothingness, because there's no things there. Things are part of existence. So this is where there's just no things. So there's a verse, again, in Book of Job, that says something about wisdom. It asks, like, where does it come from? But it's a rhetorical question, and it's interpreted because the word ayin is in there, which at its root means nothingness. So the Kabbalistic interpretation of that verse is that wisdom comes from nothingness, or keter. It comes from nothingness. It comes out of nowhere, like the idea that pops in your head. Where was the idea before it popped in your head? I don't know. Came out of the ether, right? It came out of who knows, right? So that's the concept here, which is neat. So just like wisdom comes out of nothingness, so when you're dealing with the lower seven, Yesod, which is underneath and just like, very much like what's above it, wisdom, that too comes out of nothingness. Or we saw those seven things that God, created before the world, and Chesed wasn't there because Chesed is what was, out of the picture and brought everything in. So Chesed comes out of nothingness too. And it talks about even like the idea of here, what is it, Amos? Yeah, Amos says, "I was no prophet and I wasn't a prophet's son. I was just a herdsman and a dresser of sycamore trees. I'm nobody, right? Nothing. And the Lord took me from the flock and said, go be a prophet," right? So that's the same idea there. It like came out of nowhere, and God uses, what's that phrase? Improbable people for impossible tasks. Then the other one refers to our friend Abraham we're talking about today, the model of Chesed. It's the same thing. His constant wandering and just go. There's like nothing he contemplates before. He just moves, he just goes without question. So these are a couple of interesting quotes regarding the concept of the Zadik and how it relates to Chesed. Then let's keep going. There's a lot of interesting concepts. This one's wild. The concept of the Zadig's power to heal the sick. And it says here, and this is by Emmanuel Shachet, who passed away not that long ago. He's a really deep Kabbalistic, I think it was Chabad writer. He even wrote and defended the idea that the Messiah can come from the dead, that he can die and come back. It's like they were accusing him of being a Christian and all this stuff. And it's like, no, he was nailing this stuff. It's amazing. Anyhow, so great is the power of Zadik that his healing can extend simply to those near him. It says here that people would just, what does it say? Yeah, just be cured by Abraham by looking at him. That kind of amazing power. And then below is same idea here, right? This is what we find through the Talmud Midrashim. Tzaddikim have always been approached to pray for children sick and trouble, so the power of the healing. It's interesting on the first one, though, because there's three times in the New Testament a woman touches Yeshua's clothing, is healed. Peter, they walked in Peter's shadow and they were healed. Paul had some handkerchiefs they would touch and were healed. So you see this concept, three different people, Yeshua, Peter, and Paul, all with people getting healed by either being near them or in the shadow or touching the garment, a garment that belonged to them. It's really weird. So that's not like outside of Jewish thinking, is my point. None of that stuff is. I have a whole section on the 13 petals showing all these things in the New Testament and how they're found in Torah literature. So that's interesting. But let's not stop there. Um, Here's the crazy one. It gets crazier. The idea that after a Zadik dies, that the power of that Zadik does not go away, even after death. So here it talks about Caleb, and this story of Caleb was on his way with the spies. Moses sent, separated himself from the others, and went to the cave of Machpelah to visit Abraham, Isaac, and Yaakov. There he prayed to God, and he asked for the souls of these Zadikim to arouse God's mercy, so that God would save him from becoming involved in a rebellion that would be led by the other spies. Caleb held aloof from the plan of the spies and went and prostrated himself on the graves of the patriarchs, saying to them, "My fathers, pray on my behalf, that I may be delivered from the plan of the spies." So he's not praying to them directly. The way this is translated in English is odd, but it's expressed as he was praying in their merit. Zekos, he was praying in the name of the name of their marriage for this to happen. So that's the correct understanding. That I checked into this carefully because it's an odd passage when you first read it, simply like that. Then it gets weirder. Rabbi Ginsburg, our buddy, inner.org. This is a section on his website with people that write questions in, and he responded about, is it permissible to pray at the gravesite of a Zadik in the merit of the Zadik, not to the Zadik, but in their merit? And he writes, in addition, one might directly address the soul of the Zadik, beseeching him to arouse mercy in heaven. That's interesting. That you can actually make some sort of, again, this gets into this area that's very, close to being inappropriate, but isn't. So it's not a thing you want to like fool around with. I won't question Rabbi Ginsburg's level of understanding, that's for sure. But it gets really, really deep in terms of, connecting to someone who's deceased like that. This is about as controversial as you can get here. So at the bottom, it says when a person prays at the gravesite of Zadik, the two souls unite. So that talks about what we were talking about earlier, where souls can combine, right? We were mentioning that. They unite to arouse divine mercy and bring down blessing. So this is fascinating. I'll give you a minute if you want to read that, the rest of it. But again, these concepts related to the Zadik, especially, are found throughout the New Testament, all over. And it's one of the more interesting ideas because, we're made in the image of God. We have the power of God within us. We have the Shekhinah within us. Like we are so, connected. What is that verse? Something about the questioning issue and says, you're saying you're God or something, and he quotes Psalms. Are we not all Elohim? Right? It's like, okay. So that gets real interesting. All right, let's see here. I think that's it for that. Okay, I'm gonna pause for a second here before we look at this text. And I know there's a lot of reading here, so this is recorded, so you can read it all later because these are awesome, really cool concepts. Oh yeah, I mentioned this is my other book that's completely tattered, and this is just a picture from the internet because mine is being held together by gorilla tape on the spine. Derek Hashem is like, oh yeah, it's followed myself or my wife around for years. It's like falling apart. Um, so we'll pause for a moment. Anything on the Zadik you guys want to mention or ask or talk about before we move forward? All right. All quiet on the Western Front. This is good. But you have to promise me to watch this later. Send questions. Because I read this stuff 100 times and I'm still questioning stuff. Like, what in the world? This is an awesome book. The Way of God is basically, Derek Hashem is basically an outline of all the fundamentals of Torah Judaism. Like, what is God? What is this? What is the soul? What is it? Atonement. It's an explanatory text that goes through. Starts pretty easy and it gets complicated. And I know this is on page 122 in my memory, if you have the book. And it's interesting. Again, this is getting into the whole concept of Zadik. And again, the reason I'm bringing this up today, because the Omer count is like guiding us toward this kind of a image of somebody that is, really at that level, which we would love to be. What does it say? Yeshua in the gospel said, be perfect like your Father in heaven is. You can't be perfect, but that's saying keep moving in that direction. Let's try to attain that perfection. So the rules, the community of the future world, that's those who end up in the Olam Haba, which is, according to Judaism, most of humanity, contrary to other religious beliefs that think 99% of people go to hell. Judaism teaches no, there's only a small, extremely evil group of people that are done away with, and they're not burning in hell, they're just done away with. And most people will make it. It just, in that world to come, there's like, I guess, different levels of who you are. I guess you could call it reward, right? Um, so the community future world, Olam Haba, is restricted only to those who attain perfection in their own right, is not absolute. Okay, so that contradicts the idea that you have to be perfect to get there, or someone else did that for you. For it was decreed that an individual can reach a level where he can partake of perfection and be included in the community as the result of his association with a more worthy individual. So it's like praying in the name of Yeshua or praying in the name of Rebbe Nachman in the Ushpizin movie, right? So when you in faith, true faith in God, recognize that there's a righteous person who has this connection to God, and you make a connection with them that you need, like you need their help, and you recognize that's from God. When you do that, God honors that, and that connection through that person benefits you and gives you that boost you need to whatever. We'll cover that in a minute. The only difference is that he will remain on a lower level, see, in the world to come, since he's not included in the community in his own right, but through association of another. So there's a teaching that Lot got his lucky break because of his association with Abraham, right? Um, the only ones who are cast aside completely from perfection, therefore, are those who are not worthy at all, neither through their own merit nor through association with another person. Because of this, the number who are saved from annihilation and allowed the ultimate bliss is maximized. So very few people are annihilated, like I said earlier. Those who cause others to partake in the world to come will definitely be the foremost in the community. That could include any of us. If you're helping people and they come to, an understanding of Torah and stuff and lead a great life, and you had something to do with that, that's credit to you. The key thing is you should never do these things hoping, oh, I'm going to get a reward, because then you've gotten your reward. You should just do this out of love of Hashem. But the reality is that that's how it works. They will be the leaders, while those who enter by virtue of their association with them will be beholden and dependent on them. So there's a tiered, like in the Olam Haba, it's weird. It's like a tiered system, which we don't have much more information on. In order for this to be possible, all men were originally bound to each other. So that's like the idea of all the souls being connected. We talked about it earlier at one point. As our sages teach, all Israel are responsible for one another. As a result of this, each individual is bound to everyone else, and no man is counted separately. Hashem's attribute of good is the stronger, however, and if the guilt for sin is shared by others, this must certainly be true of the merit associated with good deeds. So that's interesting because this sets up the concept of like atonement. Because if something bad can like spread through the people, it's almost like a virus, then you can inject something, namely the input of a Zadik or Mashiach into the system, into a person, and that can spread through the community as well, in a sense, to heal. So because all the souls are connected, it's pretty wild concept. This gets even more fun. Among the most important elements of this sequence is the requirement that man must be punished for his wickedness until the attribute of justice is satisfied. So this is interesting. The system we're in and why things happen that seem like difficult and all is that there is this perfect system that is broken, and as it's expressed here, you have to satisfy the attribute of judgment, which is balanced through suffering. I'm going to get into that more here. Hashem arranged matters, however, so that select perfect individuals could rectify things for others, as discussed earlier. So what he's saying here is that if you deserve this much punishment, this big amount of punishment, a righteous person that you connect to can alleviate you of some of that, okay? Because he or she shouldn't be punished. So they can take on what's the word I'm trying to find? They can take on more of that because they don't deserve it. It alters the equation. The attribute of justice therefore relates to them rather than the rest of the world in general. Individuals such as these, however, are themselves perfect and are therefore worthy only of good. The only reason that they suffer is because of the other, and the attribute of justice must therefore be as satisfied, here it is, with a small amount of suffering on their part as much as with a large amount on the part of those who actually sinned. So the attribute of justice, when it sees a righteous person suffering on behalf of another, is satisfied because they shouldn't be. It's a deep concept and sets up the whole idea of the Mashiach and stuff. Let's keep going. Beyond that, the merit and power of these Tzaddikim is also increased because of such suffering, and this gives them even greater ability to rectify the damage of others. So they're actually energized by this. They can therefore not only rectify their own generation, but can also correct all the spiritual damage done from the beginning, from the time of the first sinners. We're going back to Adam here. So it's saying that a righteous person could actually cause rectification or atonement going back. It is obvious that individuals such as these will ultimately be the foremost leaders in the perfected community that's in the world to come, and the ones who are the very closest to Hashem. All this is not only the result of justice, but also follows from the actual order of things. As a result of man's sins, corruption is increased and incorporated into both man and the world. This in turn causes Hashem's light to be increasingly retracted and hidden. The more that this corruption is cleansed, on the other hand, and the more people that are purified of it, the more Hashem's light is once again revealed step by step. So there's this plan that goes through history of Tzaddikim coming in and doing things, correcting things. It's all part of a plan that leads us to the world to come one day. The Olam Haba, also called the New Covenant. That's the time of the New Covenant when Torah is on the heart. There's no more need for Torah getting us closer to God. Will already be there. It changes the role of Torah at that point. This is where Christianity gets confused, because there's references to the New Covenant in the Gospels, and they think that's like happening there, or Jesus brought this in, or stuff like that. No, according to Judaism, Torah, the faith of Yeshua himself, there's a plan that things have to happen at certain points, including what happened 2,000 years ago, that is necessary to then initiate like the next phase of the plan. And that's a whole thing that is in another book by the Ramchal, by the same author, called Secrets of the Redemption, that explains that stuff. Okay, there's more. Suffering is the thing Hashem created to cleanse the pollution, both in general and in particular. That's important. Like when you go to the book of Revelation and you have those series of 7 judgments, the 3 sets, the reason for that is this. It's actually bringing cleansing or bringing rectification of the world. It's a type of suffering. So that's not just, oh, God's mad and he's killing people and sending plagues. All these things are directly correlating to what needs to be rectified in the world. It's a difficult process, but that's how it works. So this book gets into a lot of that, but this is a section here. Thus, through the suffering of these select individuals, creation in general is cleansed, and step by step the world is brought closer to perfection. Hold on, we're not done. It gets weirder. As a result of this principle, suffering and pain may be imposed on a Zadik as an atonement for his entire generation. So yes, a Zadik can atone for others. Did you get into a whole argument over, and I'm not defending Christianity, but the New Testament I will defend, And you get this whole idea of, oh, it's no one can atone for another person. Yes, they can. Now, this was interesting because I was on Pal Talk for years, and there was this Jewish room, and I went in there, and the guy was attacking that concept. And my wife was with me. I came in there, I said, no, that's a concept in Judaism. No, it's not. Oh, yeah, it's in a book. And I bring in the book, I read it, and they call their rabbi. The rabbi gets online with us. And guy tells him what I'm saying, and I read the book, and the rabbi says, "Yeah, it's absolutely true." So that was a really funny moment, I guarantee. And the sad part is, like a week later, I popped in the room again, and the guy was still teaching that it wasn't true. This is sad. Anyhow, the Zedek must then accept this suffering with love. Does that sound familiar? For the benefit of his generation, just as he accepts the suffering imposed on him for his own sake. In doing this, he benefits his generation by atoning for it, and at the same time is himself elevated to a very great degree. That is all, those words are all exactly in the New Testament. All of those words. It's like, being elevated for what he did. Crazy, huh? For a Zadik such as this is made into one of the leaders of the community of the future world, as discussed earlier, such suffering also includes cases where Zadik suffers because his entire generation deserves great punishments. And you see that concept come up in not only the New Testament, but in Torah literature about generations that are just wicked, bordering on annihilation. It's kind of like what happened with Moses, right, in Israel. But it's spared by way of the Zadik suffering. In atoning for his generation through his suffering, the Zadik saves these people in this world and also benefits them in the world to come. In addition, oh boy, he goes deeper here. There's a special higher type of suffering that comes to a Zadik who is even greater, more perfected than the ones discussed above. This is basically the Mashiach. And if you look in Rabbi Nachman's books, you see the connection. He's basically talking about a Mashiach person. There may be more than one in a sense, or maybe just the one. This suffering comes to provide the help necessary to bring about, here you go, the chain of events leading to the ultimate perfection of mankind as a whole. There's this a whole concept that's missing in my Christianity, that there's this plan of God that has these things that are, have to play out a certain way. According to the original plan, there you go, the sequence of worldly events requires that man undergo at least some suffering before both he and the world could attain perfection. This was required by the very fact that one of the basic concepts of man's predicament was that Hashem should hold back his light and hide his presence. Mr. Panim, right? This became all the more necessary as a result of the corruption and spiritual damage caused by man's many sins, which held the good back even more and caused Hashem's presence to become all the more hidden. The world and everything in it are therefore in a degraded evil state and require that Hashem's unfathomable wisdom bring about numerous chains of events to achieve their rectification. So that concept comes up a lot, this chain of events, these righteous people, and like one in particular, they can fix everything. So that's the fundamental stuff to the Zadik that needs to be understood to properly understand what the New Testament is saying. And it's critical. There's so much to learn to even begin to understand what the New Testament is trying to say. Here are some different quotes that I find are very interesting. Oh, I mentioned Rabbi Nachman, right? So it's very good to attach yourself to true Zadik, and the upheavals at the time of the coming of Mashiach. God will grasp the ends of the earth and shake the wicked from it. Yikes. But one who's attached to a true Zadik will be able to cling to him so as not to be cast off by the wicked. By holding onto the Zadik, he will remain firm. Let's go to the right, Ginsburg. An unrectified person prays only for his own sins. A righteous person prays only for the Shekhinah, God's immanent presence. The intermediate person begins with prayers for the presence of God, the Shekhinah, and then prays for himself as part of the Shekhinah. That's the Song of Songs right there. My connection to the Shekhinah is by means of Mashiach. Interesting, huh? The groom and the bride. My connection to the bride is by means of Mashiach, a human being whose sorrow is the sorrow of the Shekhinah. Let's go over to the left. I like this one. One who attached himself to the true Zadikim as true faith. Mashiach is the true Zadik. One who accepts Mashiach will receive from him pure faith and will not have misplaced his faith. There's another quote I couldn't find. I'll try to find it. It talks about a righteous person that's sent down to Gehenna, that Mashiach, because he's connected to the Zadik, the Zadik like reaches down and pulls them out of Gehenna, which is right, I think, in Corinthians, that there's no judgment or something for the one connected to Mashiach, right? I think it's in Corinthians. It's interesting. And lastly, on the right, and this is one of the concepts I think I mentioned earlier about Song of Songs, that it's considered the holiest of all the Torah books by Rabbi Akiva. He calls it the Holy of Holies. Says all the books of the Torah are holy, but the Song of Songs is the Holy of Holies. pretty wild. And this quote, thus it's written the Song of Songs of Solomon, for the song is superior to all the other songs of Solomon. Within it is a secret, concealed and sealed from the days of Abraham until the coming of Mashiach. That is right up like Daniel 12:4, right? Seal this up till the days of the coming of Mashiach. So there's something secretive about it. And the teaching is that the book, Shir Shirim, Song of Songs, will only truly be like reveal what it holds in the last generation, which is an interesting idea. And I've got this project dealing with that. And I got some fun stuff after this. So if we want to take a little break here, if anyone wants need a break, questions, let's take like a minute. I'm not even going to pause the recording. I've just got a cat here that's looking for cat food. Oh, he ran off. I got Pet World here. I'm sure you've heard me. 2 dogs and a cat. And this summer I'm going to have 4 dogs and a cat because I'm going to inherit my daughter's 2 dogs for like 2 months. So that's going to be wild fun.
Hey, Tovia.
Go for it.
I kind of have this concept, but I know that somebody's going to ask me when I try and tell them this. The Sadiq is perfect. And then another
The what?
paragraph says the Sadiq is perfect. And
Well,
then in the next paragraph, it says one is more perfected.
yeah.
Righteous.
So there's a text called the Tanya. I don't know if you're familiar with the Chesidic
Yeah, I know
text.
the Tanya.
It's on Chabad.org. There are 5 levels, and there's the perfect Zadik, and then there's a Zadik that is not quite perfect, who still has some minor level of thought or struggle, like a bad thing comes in his mind and he has to push it out, whereas the perfect Zadik, it doesn't even enter. It actually distinguishes between levels of Zadikim in the Tanya and in Derek Hashem. Then there's the
Thank
Benoni.
you.
Huh?
Okay. Thank you. That very helpful.
Yeah, that's in
Thank you very much.
that's in Tanya. Yeah. So then you have the intermediate Benoni, which is a person. Unfortunately, it sounds like we don't even qualify for that. A person who like doesn't sin, but they might be tempted. Then you have the smaller, the slight Rasha, who still has good but does some evil now and then. I guess
Yeah.
that's me, and I won't speak about you. But then you have the totally wicked. So there's 5 levels. The 5th one is the Hitlers, you know, and then
Yeah.
most of us apparently are somewhere between. And again, there's the number 5, right? It's always about like 5 types of humans, you know. So that's what that is. You got the really bad, the not so bad, the in the middle one, the really good, and the perfect. And the upper 2 are both considered
Cool.
the
I'll explore the Tanya more.
yeah. There's a 3-book series by the late Dean Steinsaltz called they're different books with sounds exploring the Tanya, opening the Tanya, and I forget the 3rd one. They're all like beautiful covers because there's 3 different colors and they look, it's really pretty. I got them here. That's like the best. I mean, you can go on Chabad, has some good stuff there, but those 3 books, oh man, really good stuff. All right, so you're wondering why I'm looking at baseball, because baseball's starting soon. But this was interesting. You'll notice the numbers on the players. There was a player, I love telling this story because it's personal. There was a player named Jackie Robinson. He was really the first Black American to break into the major leagues, which was, horrible for Black people, Black athletes then. They got, things called out from the audience, real awful. So it was a real struggle. But he was very instrumental, a really nice guy, and really instrumental toward, bringing unification, bringing, what Zadik does to now look at sports, right? It's all integrated, So he broke the barrier, if you will. And a quote from him at the left, the top quote, "A life is not important except in the impact it has on other lives." Now, every day in baseball, they have a Jackie Robinson Day. His number is retired. No baseball players wear number 42 anymore. It's retired from baseball. But on Jackie Robinson Day, every player wears number 42, which I find absolutely mind-blowing, that this whole idea of connecting everything is in baseball. It's like, do they even know what we talked about? It's wild. The last player to wear 42, and he was allowed to use the last one in the bottom right, is Mariano Rivera, top pitcher for the New York Yankees, of course, right? And he is a huge, believe it or not, huge advocate for Israel. He's Hispanic. He's like very outspoken about Jews in Israel. And so that's amazing, right? Another connectivity. He wore 42, and his quote at the end as he left baseball was the same. Most important thing, to help others and make an impact, not just on the field, but off the field too. So they both said similar quotes that they're known for. And Rivera was the last one to wear 42. I just find it's completely remarkable that this number is at the center of bringing things together in baseball, America's pastime. So I thought this kind of wild that this is kind of found its way into our culture, you know? So I brought that up because I'm in a section here where we're looking at some fun stuff. We've seen this one before and talked about it a lot, that the 7 Sephiroth we talk about are virtually identical to what you read in this book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which you can often find in a Goodwill for $1 or $2, which I have. I usually buy whatever's there and send it to people, you know. Incredible book. Boss at work one year told us we all had to read it. I'm like, yeah, okay. It's just, when I read it the first time, I'm like, this is crazy. This guy must have studied the Kabbalistic stuff and repackaged it, you know. And he was a Mormon. Covey was a Mormon. And I know they get into some mystical stuff too, which is weird. So if you go through the book, it's like you're reading a primer on the Omer count. It really is. It's so mind bending how close it is. So anyhow, this found its way into literature. Then of course, you know, my favorite thing is movies here. The Ushpizin movie is all about the emanations, how they relate to the main character and rectifying him as well as them. But we talked about that when we did the movie night. In my favorite movie, The Matrix, the characters all align with different Sephiroth in the movie. And Neo, who's called the One, has the path up to what's called the Source. No one knows what the source is exactly. It represents Keter. It's this mystical thing outside of their existence. In fact, the architect is called the creator, but he's and he's called the father. And the oracle is called the mother, who co-created the Matrix. But they're within the existence. The true creation of everything is this mystical source beyond. Like I said, these movies are absolutely patterned on these teachings, right? And on the left side, which is the side of restriction, so that's where, when it's applied to restricting the light of God, is where evil emanates from, because it's evil. Restrictions is neutral, you know, it's just good and bad, right? But that's where this comes, where evil comes from when it restricts the light of God, which is done through sin mainly. But you have these two aspects that are in the movie, Agent Smith and the Merovingian. And of course, in Torah, you have the concept of Hasatan, who is the, you know, accuser, right, and destroyer. And then you have also the concept of the serpent in the garden, the tempter, right, you know. And in the movie, Agent Smith is the Hasatan figure who accuses the humans and restricts them and kills them, you know. And the Merovingian is this guy who's got a party guy who he's got his own little world set up with. It's all about, you know, sex and you know, food and, you know, like that. And he represents the tempter, the serpent, in there. In fact, this stuff I've pulled out on the website about things he says in the movie and everything, which are absolutely crazy how much they align, you know. I'm not gonna get into it too much. You can always go look at my website, Matrix for Humans, because it's a whole Kabbalah class. So you have the whole idea of him, Neo, the One, connecting Trinity and another bride and the groom concept, right? And it's cool in the 4th movie because it shows the concept of going to and fro, going up and down. So Neo has to fight his way to the source, but Trinity brings everything back down and completes it. And at the end, she is the feminine aspect of everything, including like the Mashiach concept, it's masculine and feminine, all right? Everything is. And at the end, when I don't want to give away too much. If you haven't seen the movie, you might, you know. It's the 4th movie is really weird, but I loved it because all the concepts were like coming together there, because it's at that 4th level. And at the end is the scene where they jump off a building and she's the one that's like floating in the air and holding him up, because at the end, the feminine actually is the crown on the head of the man, right, in Proverbs. So she takes the upper position at the end, which is fascinating. I saw that. I was like, wow, they really pulled it off. Of course, you've seen this one, Winnie the Pooh. This one is mind-bending. The 10 characters could not align better with the 10 Sephiroth. They really do. I did a lot of Winnie the Pooh with my daughter when she was little. Not like this exactly, but, you know, teaching just like the concepts about this one or that one. Great way to teach kids just spiritual concepts, because that's what they are, you know. Piglet is all chesed and proactive, doesn't always think things through. Rabbit's critical of everything, right? Rue is, jumps around. He's Netzach and starts. He doesn't have boundaries. Sometimes he gets into trouble. Gopher on the other side is Hode. He takes out measurement tools and blueprints to measure things ahead of time. It's just incredible. And Tigger, of course, if Tigger's behaving, things go well. And when Tigger gets his ego out of check and he says that's what Tiggers do best and he can do anything, that's when problems emerge. That's the concept there of being a humble Zadik. Eeyore is interesting because he sounds like a boy, but he's got a pink on his tail, and he's the only one that walks on all fours. And the Shekhinah is said to be like the four corners of the world. The number four is always comes up a lot with the Shekhinah and the four on the ground, which is interesting. Wait a minute, I had another thing about Eeyore. What was it? Let's see here. No, no, I thought I did. But anyhow, the characters do, and yeah, and the character of Christopher Robin, he kind of appears sometimes. He's in the movies, but he's really a real character outside the picture. Um, Anyhow, and Kanga's the upper feminine, right? She's the mother figure. So it's and of course, Pooh is our guy in the middle, right? Everything's about Pooh in the- So it, and Owl is all Hokmah. So Hokmah and Binah are the aspect of time. So this is another interesting thing about the 10 Sephirot is that you have the six spatial dimensions in the middle. So like in the Sukkah at Sukkot, where you wave the lulav in the six directions, right? So you have east and west, which on the diagram is actually up and down, east toward God, west toward the world. You have south and north, which is Chesed is south. North is always associated with judgment in the Torah. And then you have up and down. Netzach is up and Hod is down. If you remember earlier, we looked at that little table where we talked about Netzach and Hod, like the footsteps of Mashiach, but he's bringing things down to earth and making the connection above and below. But then you have the aspect of time as well in this chart, with Chokhmah is past and Binah is future. So that's where in Kabbalistic teachings where time comes from. So you have the six spatial dimensions, so you know where someone is, right? And you have past and present with Chokhmah Binah, so you know when someone is. And then you have this fifth dimension, which is, well, what is their state? Is it holy or unholy? Which is like holy is toward Keter and unholy is toward Malkut. Not that it is unholy, but it's away from God. You know what I mean? So you can plot, if you think of it, plot somebody in history at any point, at any place, and if they're acting righteously or not, according to this diagram, which is fascinating. But that's one of the things about that. And then, of course, I've been working a lot lately on things that are coming about with this new financial system. And I'm sitting there one night and I got all these things on a piece of paper and I start looking at them and go, yeah, these are kind of and I'm not even thinking about this. And it's like, these are the things that are kind of active and these are the things that kind of like reactive. And these are the things that kind of connect. And I'm like, oh my goodness. And I just like laid them out on the thing like this. I'm like, they fit again. And what's above? AI, artificial intelligence, AGI, which is the next stage of artificial general intelligence. And then we're doomed at ASI, artificial superintelligence, where they just don't need the humans at all. This is all being worked on, and that's energizing this whole new system they're putting in place. Plus the desire to do it because it's going to free up a lot of money and they think it's going to make the planet a better place. It's interesting to read what they talk about or watch these conferences they have, which I've been doing the last couple of years. And I first wrote about this stuff, believe it or not, in 1990, and I still have my documents. They printed them, that what they were planning to do, like the IMF, International Monetary Fund, and all this stuff. This has been in the works for like 3 decades. And now they have this technology finally to do it. So they're putting it all in place. So it's the next few years are going to get really weird. That's for certain. I'm not being prophetic here. I just read what they're up to. It's not in the news, but you're going to see a lot of bizarre changes coming up in the next year or two. Anyhow, not to frighten anyone. It's just like, it's just weird. So this is coming. So anyhow, this lays out on the chart as well. So yeah, that's it. That's my last one. Oh yeah, this was a bonus one. And there's books that deal with the Sephirot, which are interesting. This is one. You can get it online. I got it in a bookstore cheap, which was good. There's a bookstore in Boston area that has a lot of stuff. So this is a good book, but there's lots of books and articles online to deal with these things. And studying these things is so cool because it just tells you more about yourself. Lech Lecha, how we started the night, go to yourself, is in the image of God. And these emanations are the image of God. So let me see. There. The cat's mad at me. What's the matter here? I seem to have lost you guys. I don't know. No, you're still here, right? Okay. So now I'm tired. I'm talking like a madman here. So I'm gonna end the recording here and gotta figure out. We got my kitty wants something. Stop recording. Okay, so covered a lot of stuff here. Feel
Still
free.
recording.
Yeah, covered a lot of stuff here. I'm going to conclude with this. So if anyone's watching this, feel free to reach out on Facebook and ask for any questions, comments, or whatever. And there's a lot of background stuff, a lot of examples and things like that, which I wanted to frame it like that because there's so many ways this stuff connects to us physically, emotionally, intellectually, spiritually. And we learn, the more we can help others too. So, okay, I'm going to leave it at that. The next, we'll have a open forum on the 2nd if anyone's available, wants to just chat about anything, and then we'll resume with more like precise on Geburah. We won't do all the background stuff again. It'll just be more talking about Geburah. Maybe we'll do the Anabakoach that week. I'll see, or if I had something else in mind. But that might be a good week to do that prayer. But we'll get into like maybe one specific thing each week going forward. All right. So Baruch Hashem, and I'm going to stop recording.